There are a lot of images that come to mind when people think of Seahawks football. Maybe it's a punishing run game, or maybe it's a hard-nosed, disciplined defense, or maybe it's even an army of loud, drunken fans screaming for 4 straight quarters. But to me though, this is what I see when I think of Seattle. A ball hanging in the air, waiting to come down while millions of people hold their breath. Every single game, whether it's a win or a loss, at home or on the road, I guarantee you will see this exact image while watching the Seahawks. It's become a trademark of sorts for them. Russell Wilson scrambles around, he buys time for Tyler Lockett or Doug Baldwin to uncover down the field, and then he throws a bomb that somehow you just know is going to be caught one way or another. That's just what they do, and on most Sundays, those game-changing deep balls are the difference between Seattle winning and losing. And so with the Hawks rematch with the Cowboys looming large this weekend, I wanted to take a moment both to explain and to appreciate just what makes Wilson's deep ball so effective, and also what makes his connection with Lockett in particular so special. 2018 was a season full of insane statistics, but there might not be anything more impressive than the deep ball chemistry between Wilson and Lockett. Wilson had a perfect passer rating on his 70 targets to Lockett in 2018, which is so unheard of that I didn't even think that would be possible with a receiver getting that many passes thrown his way. While Lockett himself added a full point of value on average to the Seahawks score every time he was targeted. For reference, that's about 5 times the league average in terms of expected points added. The Seahawks threw the fewest passes in the league, and yet were still tied for second in the NFL for most 40-plus yard passing plays. Wilson and Lockett weren't just the best deep ball duo in the league, they were the best by a massive margin. So what can the Cowboys do to prepare for this, and do they have any hope of stopping it? Well, for starters, to stop the Seattle chunk plays, you have to first understand their favorite concept that they use to rip off big chunks in the first place, the smash concept. Smash is an old staple in basically every playbook and every offensive system, and its variations can be used to attack pretty much any coverage. Seattle in particular loves to pair the route combo with play-action rollouts and bootlegs to slow down the pass rush and get the defensive line moving away from Wilson as he buys time, and you also see the number 3 slot receiver, which in most cases is Doug Baldwin or a tight end, act as kind of a screening blocker to slow down the rush even more. Really, it's a 2-man route the whole way, and how it's run and how it's thrown entirely depends on how the defense plays it. For instance, when Wilson rolls out here, the first thing he's looking at is the hitch on the outside. Why is he looking there? Because he wants to see what the corner is doing. If the corner is sinking back and has his eyes on Wilson the whole time, he doesn't want that defender to keep sinking and get underneath the corner route from Lockett behind him. He wants to look at that hitch and hold the corner down there with his eyes, or in this case, he wants to recognize that the corner is staying underneath anyway by playing tight man-to-man coverage. Either way, his first look is to that hitch to make sure the DB is not sinking. After that, he moves on to the corner route itself because both Wilson and Lockett have to read the coverage post-snap to determine where to go with the ball. There are 2 ways this route can be run, or rather technically 3 ways, but we'll get into that last one in a little bit. But if the cornerback is playing behind Lockett's outside hip, like he is here in what's called a trail technique, then Lockett will carry the angle of the route further down the field and let Wilson lead him deep where only he can get it. He cannot cut at the normal angle that you will see most corner routes run at, because with a DB and outside leverage and behind him on his hip, it's very easy for that defender to then just stay on that hip all the way through the route. Which means that once Lockett actually gets to the boundary and is looking for the ball, even if that corner never actually changes his position relative to Lockett, he will now suddenly be in a spot between Lockett and the ball. And obviously we don't want that. So trail technique from outside leverage is extremely dangerous for a QB to throw against on a corner route, and Lockett doesn't want to put Russell in that kind of position to have to throw into that, so instead he'll just carry the route down the field, avoid having to take such a sharp angle, and let Wilson put it out in front of him where the defensive back cannot reach it. This spot in front of the pylon is pretty much the only place that Wilson could put that pass and still have it be reliably caught. And of course he did so perfectly because he's Russell Wilson and that's just kind of what he does. But you might be asking yourself, what if that cornerback was not in trail technique? How would that adjustment change the throw in the route for Wilson and Lockett? And for that, look no further than the Chiefs game a few weeks ago, where Seattle ran almost exactly the same concept, albeit from a slightly different formation, but the coverage was very different than the Lions game, which forced a very different kind of route to be ran. Lockett is not seeing bump and run in the slot here, but rather is being covered by an off-man corner who is giving him a whole bunch of cushion and who is opening up his hips way early to try to play over the top of a potential deep ball. If Lockett took this stem all the way to his 15-yard landmark and then took a soft angle to the boundary like he did against the trail technique in Detroit, there's a decent chance that a corner in this position would be able to just roll back over the top of that and make a play on the ball. The much safer option against that particular coverage technique, and this is what Lockett ended up doing anyway, is just taking a speed cut underneath that cornerback and running basically an out route. This is what's called cutting it flat, because you want to flatten the angle of the corner route all the way down to pretty much 90 degrees, which will keep you from drifting further down the field and back into that DB's range. You can see that Russell is waiting for Lockett to decide on how he wants to adjust that route before he throws it, because he wants to make absolutely sure that he's putting it in the right spot to match Tyler's adjustment. That's also a big reason why they run this concept off of play action so much, because that run fake and the rollout typically gives Wilson more time to wait for Lockett's adjustment so that he can then get rid of the ball accurately. So those are the two ways that Lockett can run a corner route in this play call. Either he can carry it downfield or he can cut it flat. But, as I mentioned earlier, there's also a third option that Lockett has on this play, and it's one that we will see him use every so often to generate an even bigger gain down the field, the nod post. That's when Lockett sells that he's running the same corner route in the same smash concept as usual, but then snaps it off inside and runs a post route across the face of the safety, where Wilson can then usually find him wide open over the middle. Part of the reason why Wilson holds the ball so damn long on play action, sometimes as long as 4, 5, or even 6 seconds, is that he never really knows what route Lockett is going to run when the ball is snapped. He has a vague idea that it's going to be either a corner or a post, but he doesn't know how it will be leveraged, he doesn't know if it's going to be cut flat, he doesn't know how early or how late he'll snap it off. All he knows is that one way or another, Tyler Lockett is going to work himself open down the field, and Wilson's only job is to survive long enough to throw it to him. Take this other throw from later in the Chiefs game as an example, but watch how Lockett reads it here. He kind of stutters near the top of the route a little bit while he's reading Eric Berry and Tremon Smith because he's trying to get a sense of how they're playing him, and then he nods out before cutting back in on a very flat post route. The reason he cut that back inside to the post is because Smith remembers what happens the last time he opened up his hips early against Lockett. He remembers when Lockett just cut outside underneath him, and he's not going to let that happen again. Not only is Smith over the top and in a good position to play this route if it's carried down the field, but since his hips are closed and pointing back towards Lockett, he's also in a good spot to play any corner route that is cut flat underneath him because he can then just plant and drive on it easily. Lockett recognizes that great positioning from Smith, and he knows all of his outbreaking options have likely been taken away, so all he's got left is that break back inside to the post. From the end zone angle, and this was really the fascinating part to me, you can see Wilson check Lockett and then check Berry's position in the middle of the field because he thinks that Lockett is just going to carry this route deep to the boundary, and then when he comes up ready to throw to the deep boundary area on that corner route, Lockett is nowhere to be found. He has to look back to his left to find him because he didn't expect him to break to that post, after which he then steps up and delivers a great ball to the opposite numbers for a 25-yard gain. This was the play that tipped me off to the Seahawks letting Lockett run basically whatever route he wants to. Those eyes from Wilson told me all I needed to know. And then from there I went back through literally every deep ball from them that I had charted already up to that point and realized something. Wilson never throws the ball early. He can't throw the ball early because there's nothing for him to throw to yet until he can read what Lockett is doing. He's not just reading defenses, he's reading his own receivers, and that's why the play action fake and Wilson's mobility are so important. He's one of the only quarterbacks in the league that can make an option route from Lockett work 5 seconds after the ball is snapped. When you're watching this offense on TV this weekend and you see Wilson buying time with his feet only to make a crazy 50-yard throw to his receiver that's all alone with nobody around him, and you're asking yourself, was that on purpose? Did they mean for that throw to look entirely accidental? The answer is yes. Their deep passing game is meant to look improvisational because, truth be told, it is improvisational. There is no that's just how they drew it up when it comes to the Seahawks passing game, because how they drew it up is basically just Wilson and his receivers figuring it out as they go along and relying on their chemistry to overcome good coverage. You want to know how the Cowboys secondary can stop this deep ball on Saturday? Yeah, me too. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's no defensive back on earth that can consistently cover for 5 straight seconds against a receiver that runs 4-3. If you want to keep Russell Wilson from throwing that ball, you sack him. That's your only good bet. You get him on the ground before he can drop those bombs, because as far as I'm concerned, if I can smoke a brisket in less time than it takes for Wilson to get hit, there's not a damn thing the secondary can do about it anyway. For the Cowboys, this game is probably not going to be won by Dak Prescott, or even Zeke Elliott, or even Amari Cooper for as good as he has been. Honestly, it's going to be won by DeMarcus Lawrence, and Jalen Smith, and believe it or not, Anthony Brown, because he's going to be the guy that has to cover all these slot receivers in the first place. Any Dallas victory will start with them, and there's not one single doubt in my mind about that. When it comes to Seattle in the playoffs, their most iconic image is not the run game. It's not the defense, or even Pete Carroll nervously chewing his 12th pack of gum for that day. It's this. It's the ball hanging in the air. It's receivers streaking down the field with no defenders in sight, and a stadium full of people losing their damn minds all at once. If you want to survive the January Seahawks, you have to survive this. You have to survive that deep ball, because whether or not you think you can handle it, it's coming. The Hawks might not be the best overall team in the NFC, but you better believe that they're one of the most dangerous. And if the Cowboys can survive a dangerous, hungry Seattle squad with nothing to lose and plenty of deep shots to take, trust me, they can survive anything. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode, again brought to you by our amazing sponsors over at MyBookie. They've really helped us support the channel and kept us growing all year long, and they've helped a lot of you guys make some pretty good cash on the side this season as well. If you were thinking about betting on any of these wildcard games this weekend, which I'm sure a lot of you are, and if you want to get a big 50% deposit bonus out of it while you're making those bets, head on down to the link in the description below and enter promo code Brett on sign up and deposit. That will give you a bunch of free house money to use exclusively on the site to make bets, which can then of course turn into actual real money if you win. For instance, I still had $50 in free betting credits to use last weekend, so I threw it down on the Colts to beat the Titans as 3-point favorites, and that got me an extra $40 in actual cash that's now on my account. So I had no risk to myself, there was just plenty of house money to use, and I used it and I won with it. So it's a really awesome offer. If you guys were thinking about putting down any money on the games this weekend, again, head to that link in the description below, enter promo code Brett on sign up and deposit, and go have some fun. As for me, I will of course be back next week with more film room content and more picks against the spread. We'll see who wins and who loses this week for me to figure out what the subject will be, but rest assured I will have something at some point. So I'll see you guys all again next week, and until then, later.